Hey everyone, this is a call. And so what I want to talk about today is I'm going to talk about Shravana Nakshatra. Excuse me. So Shravana Nakshatra, well, specifically what I'm going to talk about is the planetary energies as they relate to the padas of the four subdivisions within Shravana, as well as the general planets that rule this nakshatra. So the first thing we're going to look at real quick is the Gunas. And the Gunas are the fundamental energies that underlie all creation. And in the case of Shravana Nakshatra, we have all three, which is Rajasic, Tamasic, and Sattvic. On the basic level, we have Sattvic energy, meaning that there is a sort of deeper underlining spiritual purpose. There's a lot of ways to look at Sattvic energy. Some people say meditative mind, neutrality. But again, what I tend to look at is deeper spiritual purpose. So the last third of all the nakshatras in the zodiac have that as an underlining deeper vibration. So on a secondary level, the energy is tamasic, and tamasic means inertia or density. And then on the tertiary level, we're talking about rajasic energy, which is activity. So when you add tamasic plus rajasic, so in other words, something that has mass and substance, something that's got some inertia and density, but also creates motion and movement, we're talking about the moon. So the moon, as it intertwines with Saturn, because Shravana falls within Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, we start to see two energies that are, to me, they're very materially focused. You know, the moon representing this sort of mind, the sort of universal mind, like we all have a moon, we all have a mind. That's something we all share. And so also we're also, you know, since we're talking about Saturn, is gravity. So gravity is how I kind of perceive Saturn, in that it's what keeps us focused on the material, right? So, and oftentimes when we're focused on the material in excess, that's when Saturn's more negative qualities might express, which results in pain, fear, and suffering, right? So Saturn is a very spiritualizing planet, though, that's ultimately, through the process of pain, fear, and suffering, is driving us to, I guess, ultimately in the case of Shravana, is driving us to reevaluate who we're listening to. And that's the word for Shravana. The symbol of Shravana is ears, right? Another symbol is a trident, which implies the number 3, which implies communication. Now, communication in the case of Shravana is more about listening than it is about speaking. And it doesn't mean these individuals don't speak. It's just that the primary need here is to listen. Although, if you have a first pada, you might be more inclined towards the spoken, you know, to speak more than you listen. That could be a possibility there. But anyway, when we're talking about, also one thing I want to mention really quickly is I'm talking about Capricorn in general here, is that every sign in the zodiac has a sort of rulership of its soul, right? So there's the sort of what we're told rules a sign, right? So for instance, Capricorn's ruled by Saturn, right? But also as Capricorn evolves, then there's another planet that might come to the surface which demonstrates the evolving side of Capricorn. In the case of, like I said, once again, in the case of Capricorn, we're talking about the evolving side of Capricorn is, once again, Saturn, right? So Saturn rules its soul. And it took me a while to figure this out. And this is from, I believe, an evolutionary astrology perspective here. But the thing that I found most interesting about this idea that Saturn once again rules its soul is, it's not evolutionary astrology, it's soul-centered astrology is where I got this concept of what rules the soul of a particular zodiac sign. But when it comes to Saturn ruling the evolving side of Capricorn, I was like, well, what's that mean? What it really means is it has to do with reconfiguring the box. And I feel like Shravana represents the sort of overall struggle for Capricorn in a lot of ways. And that struggle really is, how do we, because I would say on the unevolved side of Capricorn, and Shravana specifically, the energy is that of an outcast, right? So an outcast is, you could say the worker class, right? So the worker class, what do? They obey, right? So obedience is what happens when Shravana in Capricorn is not honoring spirit, not honoring intuition, and ultimately not listening, right? So now what ends up happening is as Shravana natives and Capricorn start to listen differently, and listen to what? Listen to their intuition, their inner voice. When they listen to that, then they start to be guided by, I would say, higher goals, higher aspirations. This is a very goal-oriented nakshatra, very persevering. Again, the words that I kept seeing come up here were like a combination of receptivity and rigidity. And I was like, wow, this is kind of blowing my mind, because those are contradictory energies in my opinion. I kept seeing open-mindedness, but then I said narrow-mindedness, all in the same sentence. And I'm like, boy, what is that really? And so what it is, and again, has it go back to how is the Shravana native, how are they listening, and whom are they listening to? Are they listening to an external authority or an internal authority? Of course, early in life, most of us, all of us, and Shravana natives in particular, might be listening to external authorities, meaning teachers, parents, media, again, every voice but their own, right? So the implication here is there is something passive about this particular nakshatra, and that word receptivity, I think, describes, because of the moon rulership here, describes it pretty well. So what happens when the moon is not connected to intuition? Well, then we get words like changeable, vacillation, fear, paranoid. Okay, so and then words when we are connected, to our intuitive sense, I have universal compassion, motherly nurturing, complete receptivity to universal mind, right? So those are much more positive qualities. So when you apply this idea of compassion, motherly nurturing to an individual who's always going to be driven on material plane, these individuals are, I don't see these folks ever becoming an ascetic and like saying, I'm going to go live in a cave, right? Like their mission in life in a lot of ways is with material things. And that's not a flaw, right? Like you can apply spiritual principles to anything. And the idea that spiritual looks a particular way, it's a silly notion to me. Like, and I've had these notions myself, that, if you're spiritual, you're like meditating 5 hours a day and you're doing yoga all the time and, whatever the generalizations are, right? But the reality is that you can apply material principles to the spiritual principles to the material plane, and that is done through the intuition. The word purpose often comes up, now I tend to think of purpose in a very generalized sense, which is, from point A to point B, from birth to death, there's, I would say, two purposes. One's purpose in life is on a again material plane level, is sort of like when you honor intuition, you honor that deeper sense of knowing, you honor where enthusiasm and love and joy lie in your life, you start to, and again, these individuals, the words here are listen, learn, and teach, right? So apply, listen, learn, and teach. You can exchange the word teach for guide or create or whatever it is. But the reality is that they're here to reconfigure the box, right? I would say from point A to point B, from birth to death, we have to be busy. These individuals are going to be very busy. They're very persevering, very ambitious, very driven. All those are great words. They're going to do these things. And as long as they stay focused on inner authority versus outer authority, they're going to create a very purpose-driven life, which I'm sure is a book somewhere. I think it is. Anyway, they're filling that time, right? That's the point I'm getting at. They're filling that time. And that mission is to reconfigure the box, which is Saturn. Box is how we organize ourselves as a people, right? So the institutions that we utilize to organize ourselves and to structure our governments and things of that nature. So Shravana is here to mess with that. They're here to realign the boxes so that we fit in them better, if that makes any sense, right? So they're here to reconfigure the box so that they suit humanity better. Because these individuals, again, when they're resonating at a higher frequency, when the moon's functioning through that higher frequency, again, that sort of nurturing and that compassionate and the sympathetic aspects, like they can really be, they can really apply a lot of heart to these institutions and really create better forms for man. So that's the generalized point A to point B purpose. Now not generalized, but the sort of material level of it, right? Excuse me, there's a train coming by. We have to go by. All right, good. So the other purpose of, and this is true, I think, of every human being, so this doesn't just apply to Shravana. Purpose also can be from the sense of vibration, right? Vibration, that's really the best way to put it. So what resonance are we carrying, right? So we come into this lifetime carrying particular frequencies. I don't believe in this idea that we're born on a blank slate or tabula rasa. I believe we are born and we have karmas, things that need to be worked through in this lifetime, and our parents and, the nurture aspect of our life path in a lot of ways inform, well, I wouldn't say inform, but they trigger those karmas, right? They trigger those karmas that happen. And so how we deal with those karmas will either decrease our frequency or increase our frequency. Everything's about free will and choice, right? So in my opinion, everyone's purpose is to increase their frequency, to be clear, right? Because that's really what we're talking about, unburdened and clear at the point of death, right? So you get to the point of death, you've increased your frequency to a certain amount, then you die. That's it, right? So I think the idea of purpose is actually relatively simple to explain if you look at it from that perspective. Excuse the sidetrack. So I want to go ahead and go into the padas now. So we have pada 1, pada 2, pada 3, pada 4. Again, 4 padas make up the divisions within every nakshatra. And again, these represent the sort of characteristics of the nakshatra as well as the life path in a lot of ways. So Mars, in the case of Shravana, and these are fast-moving planets. The implication of fast-moving planets is that, to me, they represent a quicker transformational process, potentially, but they also kind of represent energies that may move so fast that the individual is not conscious of them, right? So, again, the thing here with Shravana is they really need to slow down and listen. So the first energy here, Mars, pada 1, will add the sort of drive, the ambition, the sort of, again, it's his instinctual drive, right? And I wrote down career focus as well. So that's, again, these folks are here to do things and to be busy, right? So that's what you're going to get an extra oomph of with Mars. You're going to get that extra ambition, that extra drive, that extra focus. You also may be more Shravana to me is not a super talkative nakshatra. I mean, it is, but the talkative nature of Shravana can oscillate between meaningful and then like small talk gossip, right? So I would say the gossipy aspect of Shravana is probably not its good qualities, right? Like it's I don't know. To me, it's kind of serious nakshatra. It's not supposed to be overly gossipy. At least, from my perspective, when they're functioning really, really well, they stay away from the small talk. So then on the second pada, we have Venus rules the second pada, and I wrote down diplomacy, tact, and entertainment. The reason I wrote down entertainment was because of the entertainment industry, which is the application of aesthetic, right? On a lot of levels, we can talk about aesthetic as not just being a visual thing, right? It's also about creating things people want to hear, music, art, etc., etc. So you're going to get a little artistic some of the artistic aspects of Shravana is expressed in that second pada. So in diplomacy and tact are also very, I'd say, energies that are associated with Taurus, and that's essentially when I talk about Venus ruling the second pada here. It's not Libra; it's this Taurus energy. So Taurus can be very diplomatic and also, tactful. Can. Mercury, third pada. This is Gemini Mercury, and I wrote down flexible, cunning, and mass media. The reason I wrote down mass media had to go back to what I see as a function of Shravana, which is this communication, right? So now you're having an extra, again, you get that extra oomph of communication, that extra level of discernment, the sort of flexible mind, and that all comes here because of the influence of Mercury within Shravana. And again, specifically in pada 3, you're going to be extra communicative. I would say this adds another level of intelligence, right? So this knowledge seeking that Shravana is really good at, research, things like that. The big deal for Shravana here. I guess the pitfall here might be to this endless search for knowledge, right? And oftentimes when the solutions we're actually seeking lie within, and again, it goes back to you can keep seeking knowledge, constantly seeking knowledge over and over and over, and it's this like endless mission. What ends up happening is that sometimes like the real solution and the answer just, lies with your gut, right? Your gut instinct, and no amount of thinking about something and no amount of knowledge is going to really give you the solution. Not until you have faith, right? And faith is kind of that's an energy I would associate with Shravana on some level. Is this need to have faith? They need to tap into, have some feeling of something deeper that goes beyond the material in order for them to sort of recalibrate what they're listening to, right? So the final pada is ruled by the moon. So you have an extra level of receptivity here, extra sympathetic. And I wrote down politics, and I'm not exactly sure where I wrote down politics here. I think it has to do with the sort of changeable, flexible nature of the moon itself, and the fact that these individuals are here to deal with governmental institutions and governmental structures and things like that. And I tend to look at politicians as being duplicitous, and I kind of think of the moon sometimes as being a bit of a duplicitous sort of planet. And what I mean by that is, again, because it represents the mind, and the mind doesn't necessarily always tell you its intentions. It can say one thing and show you something else. That's politics, right? And unfortunately, in modern times, a lot of our institutions, which in my opinion are in a state of decay, that goes with the entertainment. And I think Shravana, because it seems to, in a lot of ways, based on the descriptions I'm reading, rules generally mass communication and sort of politics and institutions and things of that nature. So what we're seeing here is how that energy, when it's vibrating at its low frequency, becomes perverse in a lot of ways, and then essentially the organizational aspect of this nakshatra, it's in decay, generally speaking. And it's in decay because it's now going into its sort of destruction phase. So I'm not speaking about the natives specifically, but as we look at the general energy in our culture of Shravana, and being that, again, it sort of rules this idea of communication and listening and et cetera, et cetera. So those are the 4 padas, and I'm trying to think if there's any. Let me look at my notes really quick. I think that's all I wanted to mention about this nakshatra. It's it's a very cool nakshatra, and like I said, I think if you can just remember that I use the term outcast here, and I had to puzzle on that a bit. This idea of a Shravana being an outcast energy, again, like I said, it ties back into if you are obedient, you're just a worker bee, that is possible. And, you're going to have that sort of miserable pain, fear, and suffering, carrying a burden on your back kind of feeling for your entire life if you don't start to pay attention to your inner voice. What's interesting, though, is even when you pay attention to your inner voice for Shravana, you're still an outcast. Because when you listen to your inner voice, what do? You ignore the external manipulations that come from government, that come from media, that come from outer authorities. And sorry, Shravana, you're an outcast no matter what. But it's better to be the outcast that listens to one's inner voice, one's inner authority, because then you can actually help humanity with that caring, sympathetic, compassionate mind of yours. So with all that said, thank you for watching.